The Middle East is once again on edge. Israel has launched airstrikes against Iran. These strikes are the latest salvo in a long and bitter conflict. The strikes targeted key facilities inside Iran. Tensions are high and the world is watching nervously.
I can now confirm that we have concluded the Israeli response to Iran's attack against Israel. We conducted targeted and precise strikes on military targets in Iran, thwarting immediate threats to the state of Israel. The Israel Defense Forces has fulfilled its mission. If the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, we will be obligated to respond. Our message is clear. All those who threaten the state of Israel and seek to drag the region into wider escalation will pay a heavy price. We demonstrated today that we have both the capability and the resolve to act decisively, and we are prepared on offense and defense to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel.
The potential for a wider conflict is very real. The international community has reacted with a mix of condemnation and concern. Some nations have called for restraint. Others have expressed support for Israel's right to defend itself. This latest escalation is a stark reminder of the volatility of the Middle East. The consequences of this latest round of violence could be severe. The region is already grappling with multiple crises. A wider war would be disastrous. Dialogue and diplomacy are the only way to break the cycle of violence. A peaceful resolution to this conflict is essential. The roots of the conflict between Israel and Iran run deep. They are entangled in historical grievances, ideological clashes, and geopolitical rivalries. The 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran marked a turning point. Ayatollah Khomeini, the new supreme leader, declared Israel an illegitimate state. He called for its eradication. This declaration set the stage for decades of animosity. Israel, viewing a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat, has pursued a policy of containment. This has involved covert operations, sabotage, and targeted assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists. Iran, in turn, has supported militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. These groups oppose Israel's existence and engage in armed conflict. The rivalry has also extended into the race for regional influence. Iran and Israel constantly vie for dominance in the Middle East. The recent Israeli airstrikes on Iran have drawn sharp condemnation from across the globe. Notably, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, two influential Muslim-majority nations, have voiced their strong disapproval. This reaction underscores the gravity of the situation and the potential for wider regional destabilization. Pakistan condemned the airstrikes as a violation of international law. Pakistan's foreign ministry expressed deep concern over the attacks and called for restraint from all sides. Saudi Arabia, a key U.S. ally in the region, also condemned the airstrikes. The Saudi government criticized the attacks as provocative and destabilizing. These condemnations from Pakistan and Saudi Arabia carry significant weight. They reflect the broader sentiment within the Muslim world regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Further escalation could have severe repercussions for regional stability and global security. The United States found itself in a delicate position following Israel's airstrikes on Iran. As a staunch ally of Israel, the U.S. must balance support for its ally with the need to de-escalate tensions. Israel informed the U.S. of its intent to carry out the airstrikes. The extent of U.S. involvement remains unclear. The Biden administration expressed concern over the violence and reiterated its commitment to Israel's security. It also stressed the importance of de-escalation and pursuing diplomatic solutions. The U.S. finds itself walking a tightrope. It seeks to reassure its ally while preventing a wider conflagration. Iranian defiance vowing retaliation and strengthening defenses. The aftermath of the Israeli airstrikes saw Iran responding with a mixture of defiance and a declared commitment to bolstering its defenses. Iranian officials, while acknowledging the strikes, downplayed their impact, claiming minimal damage and no casualties. However, the attacks have undoubtedly fueled anger and a desire for retaliation within Iran. Iranian state-controlled media outlets condemned the strikes as an act of aggression and vowed a forceful response. In a televised address, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi denounced the attacks as a sign of Israel's weakness and desperation. He vowed that Iran would not be intimidated and would respond decisively at a time and place of its choosing. The strikes have also renewed Iran's focus on strengthening its defensive capabilities. Iranian military officials have announced plans to expedite the development and deployment of more advanced air defense systems. This indicates Iran's determination to deter future attacks and enhance its ability to defend against Israeli aggression. A call for calm global leaders urge diplomacy and restraint. As tensions escalate in the Middle East following Israeli airstrikes on Iran, world leaders are sounding the alarm and urging all parties to exercise restraint. The overwhelming message from the international community is clear. Diplomacy, not military action, is the only path to lasting peace. The United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, expressed deep concern over the situation and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. He emphasized the need for dialogue and diplomacy to address the underlying issues fueling the conflict. His call was echoed by the European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, who urged all sides to refrain from further escalation. The International Atomic Energy Agency expressed alarm over the potential consequences of the attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities. These calls for calm and restraint reflect the global understanding that military action will only exacerbate tensions and lead to further suffering. India's plea for peace. Modi's call for dialogue and de-escalation. India, a key player in the global arena and a nation with strong ties to both Israel and Iran, has added its voice to the growing chorus calling for de-escalation and dialogue in the Middle East. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has urged both sides to exercise restraint and seek a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Modi, in a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, expressed concern over the escalating violence. He underscored the importance of dialogue and diplomacy in resolving differences. Modi also emphasized India's commitment to peace and stability in the Middle East. The Indian Prime Minister also reached out to Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi, reiterating his call for restraint and dialogue. India's balanced approach and its strong advocacy for diplomacy underscore the global desire for a peaceful resolution. The Biden administration's stance, walking a tightrope between support and peace, navigating a complex diplomatic tightrope after Israeli airstrikes on Iran, committed to Israel's security but aiming to prevent a wider conflict. Measured statements focus on de-escalation. Blinken reiterated the U.S.'s ironclad commitment to Israel's security, emphasizing diplomacy to address Iran's nuclear threat, engaging in intensive behind-the-scenes diplomacy, urging restraint to prevent further escalation. The uncertain path forward. Will diplomacy prevail, or will conflict escalate? As the dust settles from the recent Israeli airstrikes on Iran, the question on everyone's mind is, what comes next? Will this latest escalation be a catalyst for a wider conflict, or will cooler heads prevail, paving the way for diplomacy and de-escalation? The potential for miscalculation and unintended escalation is a very real concern. A single misstep, a misinterpretation of intentions, or an overreaction could set off a chain of events with devastating consequences. On the one hand, there are glimmers of hope. Diplomatic channels remain open, and there is a recognition that dialogue is the only path to a lasting solution. On the other hand, significant obstacles to peace remain. The coming days and weeks will be critical in determining whether diplomacy or conflict will define the future of the Middle East. The urgency of diplomacy, averting further conflict in the Middle East. The recent escalation between Israel and Iran, marked by airstrikes and heightened rhetoric, serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in the Middle East. This latest chapter in a long-standing conflict underscores the urgent need for diplomacy and a renewed commitment to dialogue as the only viable path to a lasting solution. Military action, while perhaps offering a temporary illusion of security, ultimately exacerbates tensions, deepens mistrust, and pushes the possibility of a wider conflict further out of reach. The human cost of such a conflict would be immeasurable, with civilians bearing the brunt of the suffering. The international community has a moral and strategic imperative to prioritize diplomacy and exhaust all avenues for peaceful resolution. This requires sustained engagement, creative diplomacy, and a willingness to address the root causes of the conflict. The alternative, a descent into further conflict, is simply unacceptable. The time for diplomacy is now.